welcome back to Bites of History with Irene Walton. Thank you guys so much for being so patient. I know we had a bit of a break, but it was so we could get some video podcasts going, make my room a lot cuter for that video podcast to get going, if you know what I mean. And I think it's going to be worth it because today we are talking about the history of Starbucks.
Have you ever wondered how it made it to your table? Have you ever wondered how it made it to your shelf? If you love food, then this is the show for you. Bites of History with Irene.
I want to take a second and thank all of the sources for today's video, so I'm going to read those off right now. Thank you to Starbucks.com, atasteofhome.com, businessquant.com, mapper.co, mash.com, historylink.org, coffeefandom.com, britannica.com, stories.starbucks.com, and this episode is actually sponsored by one of our listeners, Autumn B. Thank you so much for sponsoring this. She bought me a cup of coffee, and you can sponsor an episode too if you just send me a couple bucks on Venmo, so that when I'm researching these little episodes, I, don't have to pay for my coffee. I'm so excited to be back, and I really miss Bites of History. Thank you guys for being patient and waiting for me to get this all sorted out. It's going to be so worth it, but we're still this is our first episode, so let's be gentle, okay? Let's talk about the history of Starbucks. And I have some right here for research purposes and a visual aid. Delicious. I love Starbucks. I'm sure you guys do too. Seeing as there are over 33,000 stores in the world, I'm sure that you have either seen it or heard it or drink it every day. Somewhere in between there, I know you'd be lying if you said you didn't know what. I don't know it's Starbucks. Yes, you do. You like it. That's okay. It's all right to like things that a lot of people like, just so you know. The United States has the most Starbuckses with around 15,000 stores. Trailing that is China with over 5,000 and Japan at more than 1,000. Now, these stores span from all types of establishments. You guys know your local Starbucks might just be a little standalone store on the street that you live near, or maybe it's in a mall, or maybe it's part of a shopping center, but they have crazy locations. It's so cool what they've done with some of these places to sort of reinvigorate life into them. There are stores that are in castles in Prague and in trains in Geneva. There's actually a store which is so cool. It's in Costa Rica. It's in Poas Volcano, and the beans are actually sourced, and you can be given a tour of the bean farm for $30 at this Starbucks location. And then you can also just go get your coffee. Why not? That'd be fun. Now, here's what I find interesting is that I can almost guarantee you, just based on probability, because apparently I'm a statistician now, 9 out of 10 of the people listening or watching have had a Starbucks something, a Starbucks Frappuccino, a latte, a glass bottle from the grocery store. Maybe you've never been to a Starbucks location, but you've probably had something Starbucks adjacent. So I wanted to know where that all started, how that all started, and I figured when was the better time to dive in than right this second. So Starbucks started as a cute little operation in Pike Place Market in Seattle on March 30th, 1971. So Starbucks is in Aries, which makes a lot of sense. They sold beans, tea, and herbs. They were not selling brewed coffee at this point. That's not how Starbucks started, which is wildly fascinating to me. They also didn't even sell their own coffee beans in the first year. Jerry Baldwin, Gordon Bowker, and Zev Siegel actually were friends of Alfred Pete, who, if you are around somewhere where there's a Pete's Coffee, it's that same Pete. They knew Alfred Pete. They were really, really into the way that he sourced coffee and the beans that he made. So they were actually purchasing beans from him to sell in their stores for the first year of Starbucks being open. And we don't even see a brewed cup of coffee out of Starbucks until 1982. So what happens before then? We have our 3 founders that we just mentioned, Bowker, Baldwin, and Siegel, and they were all academics. They were teachers or something, and they were all in academia. And they all loved coffee and tea. But remember, they were all academics, which is how we get our Starbucks name. It's very closely tied to a book, a famous book. If you can guess the famous book that I'm about to say, leave it in the comments below, and I will be proud of you. I have no prize to offer, but I'm excited to see what you think. When our 3 founders were starting their business, they were, of course, reaching out to marketing executives and advertising agencies. And upon those meetings, they found and were told that companies that started with an ST in the beginning, sta, were more powerful, that they seemed to have stronger lasting power. So our founder said, okay, no problem. And they started sorting through just all the material you could find, old maps, old books, old, yellow pages. And they found an old map that had the name of a cool city, and it was called Starbo. Now, we don't get the name exactly from this yet. From Starbo, one of our founders kind of had a little brain spark of sorts and was reminded of Captain Ahab's first mate in Moby Dick, Starbuck. And thusly, Starbucks was born. And that's actually a nod to where our mermaid on the cup comes from, because she's meant to be sort of like a sexy, nautical, sea siren, mermaid, sexy girl. So it's not super like Moby Dickish, but they were like, she's hot. And they were right. So now we're moving forward a couple years. 1972 is when we opened. It's 1980 now. We're still not selling a brewed cup of coffee yet, but we're doing really well in selling the teas and the beans and the things from before. However, Siegel, one of our founders, sells his shares in 1980. Now, fast forward even 2 more years, we're at 1982 when we meet Howard Schultz for the first time. Howard Schultz changes the trajectory of Starbucks forever. He comes into Starbucks, he's very impressed with their selections of beans and teas and things like that, and he wants to be a part of this. He gets hired on as the director of marketing, but he wants to change things. He wants to keep things growing. Because he is like many of us. He realized that people might be intimidated by like, oh, these beans from Costa Rica, and these beans from here, and these beans from this place. What does that all mean? It's sort of like when you go into a wine store and you're like, I know I like wine, and I know I like red wine, but I don't know what a Cabernet is versus a Pinot Noir versus a Sangiovese. What are we fucking talking about here, bud? And Howard Schultz was like, that's how people feel when they're coming into the store. They're maybe a little bit intimidated. So they could come in wanting to buy and not get anything because they just feel kind of out of place. One of the ways he changed that was making sure that the people behind the counter and everyone who worked at the Starbucks location was really friendly and knowledgeable and knew what they were talking about. They also had pamphlets that they handed out that helped you learn and understand on your own, which was hugely successful. Now, in 1983, Schultz goes to Milan for a housewares show, which he's, I'm sure, just going to pick up some stuff for Starbucks and coffee roasters and things like that. But he falls so in love with the coffee house culture there because they have all these little coffee shops where you go and you hang out and you enjoy your drink. And he's like, light bulb moment. Oh my God, this is changing my whole life. Let's get this started, bitch. Now, when he comes back to the United States, he's back in Seattle. He brings this idea that he's so energized about back to Bowker and Baldwin, which is hard to say. So thank you for commending me on being so good at not messing up my words. He brings it back to Bowker and Baldwin and he's like, you guys, oh my God, this is so cool. Look at all the stuff we could do with coffee. And they were like, yo, literally chill out. We're so vibing on just selling our coffee beans and our teas and our, like coffee makers. We don't want to get into this whole business. Schultz was like, are you sure? Because we could sell like espresso and lattes and it would be really, really cool. And everybody would love it because I loved it so much, even just being in Milan for a little while. And they were like, no. And he was like, bet. So Schultz then makes his own coffee house called Il Giornale, which blows up, absolutely crushes the coffee scene, going wild. Now, about 16 years after the original opening of Starbucks and about 5.5 years after this whole debacle between Schultz and the original founders, Baldwin and Bowker are ready to sell. They're over Starbucks. Well, I don't know if they're over it. That's me putting words in their mouth, but they're ready to sell. And Schultz is ready to buy. I'll tell you what. Now, when Schultz buys Starbucks from Bowker and Baldwin, there are 20 stores. And within 4 years, he goes from selling the coffee equipment, and teas, like the beans and stuff, to the model that he wanted, the model that he was excited about, which was lattes and espresso and hang out and come have a drink and let's vibe out. And like, oh, we still sell coffee, but like we also can make the coffee for you. And within 4 years, there are 100 stores. And it's just blowing up. Everybody is so excited about it, and so is Schultz. So in 1992, Starbucks goes public, expands even more, and 4 years after that, in 1996, we are now seeing Starbucks in other countries already. So this is even before the new millennium, and it's popping off. Once 2000 hits, there are over 2,500 Starbucks locations. And I'm sure Schultz is very happy. He went into the new millennium stoked as hell. A couple years after that, in 2003, we see food being introduced to Starbucks. So those like little sandwiches and tea cakes and all those things that you know and love. We've only had those around for like 20 years now. And it is just flourishing. There are new locations popping up all the time. As of right now, after Kevin Johnson was the CEO for a while, Howard Schultz has stepped up again and is the current interim CEO of Starbucks. And we're of course still seeing a lot of growth from them. I can think of where I live, there is a Starbucks on one corner and then a Starbucks in a shopping center on the adjacent corner. So they're doing all right. Before we go, I want to leave you with one more quick fun fact about Starbucks. They have actually won a Grammy. Did you know this? Because I most certainly did not. According to stories.starbucks.com, in 2004, Starbucks and Concord Records teamed up to co-produce, market, and distribute a groundbreaking album with Ray Charles called Genius Loves Company. At a time when duet albums were not commonplace, Charles was paired with legendary guest artists including Norah Jones, Diana Krall, James Taylor, Elton John, Willie Nelson, and Bonnie Raitt. The landmark album went on to receive 8 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year and Record of the Year, and was certified multi-platinum with worldwide sales of more than 5 million copies. I certainly remember when Starbucks was selling CDs. Do they still? I don't think they do, but I do. And I always thought it was like so cool. And I remember one time in my 9th grade English class, this girl, her name was Val. I was like, oh, like, what do you like to do on the weekends? She's like, I'm really kind of just like a coffee house vibe kind of girl. And I was like, what? She's like, you know, when you go to Starbucks and you just like listen to the music that they play. And I will never forget that. So every time I meet somebody who's chill, I'm like, they're a coffee house girl. So thank you for that, Starbucks. But yeah, so that's it. That was the history of Starbucks. I hope you guys liked the new format. I know I did. I'm so excited to continue this because I really missed Bites of History. And I will see you next week when we talk about the history of Krispy Kreme. Goodbye.